Mike Johnson might be losing his job, and there's a lot of news about Ukraine that's tied together with bills that Johnson might put on the floor. We need to break all this down because there's a lot that is going on at the same time, and it's happening fast.
I am not resigning, and it is, in my view, an absurd notion that someone would bring a vacate motion when we are simply here trying to do our jobs.
It all started late last night when, if you remember, the Senate passed a $95 billion supplemental bill for Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, etc. And Johnson had said that we weren't going to pass it in its current state. Well, yesterday he announced that he was going to separate all that into separate bills. And you're probably wondering, why would he separate these three bills, especially after the White House and the Senate all said, you need to pass all of this together? It all goes back about roughly 2 weeks ago before the House took their vacation. Congresswoman Greene put together a motion, or the threat of a motion, that if Johnson puts anything on the floor dealing with Ukraine, that she would put a motion forward to oust him from his position.
This is basically a warning, and it's time for us to go through the process, take our time, and find a new Speaker of the House that will stand with Republicans and our Republican majority instead of standing with the Democrats.
Over those 2 weeks, we know that Johnson was doing everything possible to please people on the Republican side and Democrat side, because if Greene were to move forward with this motion, the majority in the House is so slim that the Democrats only need a few Republicans to vote with them, and Johnson would be gone. While all that was going on Saturday, we saw that Iran put together a massive attack on Israel. So that has only kind of shown Johnson that, hey, we have a lot more people that would give support to Israel. So if we separate these bills, we could potentially save my butt by not putting anything for Ukraine on the table. Also, at the same time, give support to Israel. In an interview on Fox News, Johnson said House Republicans and the Republican Party understand the necessity of standing with Israel. We're going to try again this week, and the details of that package are being put together. Right now, we're looking at the options of all these supplemental issues. As Johnson was making those announcements, the White House came forward and said, hey, the Senate already passed that $95 billion package. We don't need just Israel to get the support. We need Ukraine to get the support at the same time. And the White House is not wrong. It comes at the exact moment where Russia has been stepping up all of their attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure, especially on the energy sector. We've seen that just this past week on April 11th, Russia had launched a major attack on one of Ukraine's largest energy facilities just outside of Kyiv and destroyed it. And it comes at the same time where Zelensky revealed to us how Russia was able to destroy that power plant. And it wasn't because Ukraine couldn't fight them, it's because Ukraine ran out of Patriot missiles. In an interview on PBS News, Zelensky said that Russia had sent 11 of these missiles. We only had 7 Patriot missiles. So unfortunately, some had to have came through because we had nothing to stop them, which only illustrates the need for some kind of military package to Ukraine, which, at the current state of the bill, about 85% of that bill is only to manufacture stuff that is staying here in the United States, with the majority of that bill being to rebuild the stockpile here in the United States. But this is where things truly start to get interesting, because, as you know, Johnson said we're going to put these bills on the floor as separate bills: Israel, Taiwan, and Ukraine.
We have terrorists and tyrants and terrible leaders around the world like Putin and Xi and in Iran, and they're watching to see if America will stand up for its allies and in our own interest around the globe, and we will.
But Greene had already threatened that she would go ahead and move forward to get him kicked out if any kind of Ukrainian bill hit the floor, even though that bill would not only help Ukraine, but also help the United States. Well, within less than 24 hours after Johnson announced that he would put these 3 bills separately on the floor, we now have another congressman who said, hey, I'm agreeing with Greene here, and since you're putting something with Ukraine on the floor, I am going to second her motion.
Everyone's having to pay the IRS to fund this government that doesn't care about actually fixing the problems here at home. They just want to kick the can down the road.
This representative is Congressman Massey out of Kentucky, a Republican, and he said that he will co-sponsor a resolution to oust the speaker. According to the report, Massey actually behind closed doors went to Johnson and said, "Just resign right now. We won't have to make this whole thing public." And Johnson said no. So what does this mean for Johnson? Well, he will now need Democratic support in order to stay in the office, because if the vote were to happen today, he would be out. But at this moment, there really is no motion to vacate on the floor yet. It is really truly just a threat. And that is something I think Johnson is kind of like standing on top of. I don't think he actually believes that these two would move forward, because he knows if it were to, the Republicans will lose and the Democrats will vote him out and potentially even vote in their own Democratic leader, because it would only take a few Republicans to say yes to maybe Jeffries stepping up and moving in. But there is one thing I want you to keep in mind, that there have already been Democrats who said to Johnson, hey, if you do put some kind of Ukrainian aid on the floor, we will protect you if your own party tries to vote you out. So as you can see, there is a lot that is going on with Johnson and this vote and Ukrainian aid. And all I can say is at the end of the day, this is hurting Ukraine. While we're all dealing with the politics and going back and forth and bickering, every day Ukraine is not doing well because the U.S. can't get their heads out of their asses. Because if you go back several weeks, remember that Johnson didn't want to put anything on the floor because of the border. And is anyone talking about the border anymore? No. Then Johnson said, we're only going to put a bill on the floor if it's a loan to Ukraine that they have to pay back. And well, Zelensky came forward and actually said, fine, make it a loan. We'll pay you back. And then Johnson stepped back from that because I guess Zelensky caught him on that lie. And now we're seeing a situation in which Ukraine desperately needs more Patriot missiles. And because the United States can't figure out their whole thing and get supplemental aid to Ukraine, they're going to run out, which means that Russia is going to be hitting more targets. And what is interesting, which is something that I don't think many people are talking about, is that there's actually a fourth bill that is on the table out of that three. The fourth bill is expected to include national security-related legislation, which includes some kind of wording which would force the sale of TikTok and sell off Russian assets. You see what he did there? He kind of tied those two together. So like I said right now, there is just a lot of politics taking place. And unfortunately, while everyone's bickering in the background, Ukraine is on the losing side. They can't stop Russia. They're being told that they can't hit any Russian oil refineries because it's going to ruin the global price, but they're not giving any kind of like, hey, don't do that, and if you don't do that, we'll give you this in return. And until the United States finally figures out what they're going to do, how they're going to help Ukraine, Ukraine just kind of hanging there, just waiting, hoping that the U.S. will finally say, hey, here is something that's going to help you out down the line. Because as we said many times before, if Ukraine loses, the world loses. Nothing is going to stop Putin. So let me know what you think about this situation. Honestly, my point of view and my thoughts behind this, I know this is already at like 9 minutes long. Johnson has been holding up all this aid for Ukraine for 3 months now, over 3 months now. And during that time, he has caused more damage to the United States image than I think we've seen in many, many decades. You see, the United States has always been known to stand up for their allies. And while, from the 30s all the way up until I would say even like 4 or 5 years ago, that's 100% true. But as soon as Russia started their whole thing with Ukraine back in 2014, and Obama kind of allowed Russia to keep Crimea, that's where things really started falling apart. And now, you have to look at the United States from other countries' kind of point of view, we now look like a country that refuses to stand by their allies, where Europe is saying to the United States, hey, we need you guys to help us out here and to keep Ukraine on the right path, because if they lose, we're the next one that Russia is going to be looking at. And it's kind of interesting when you see how the United States is willing to do so much for Israel, especially as Iran, which is backed by Russia, is sending all these missiles to Israel. And the United States and France and other countries are taking down those missiles, and Ukraine turns around and goes, well, can't you do this for us? I mean, they're not a part of NATO. They're not a part of any organization, and you're just helping them. And then the United States and the UK go, no, we're not going to do anything like that. That's something completely different, even though what's happening in Israel with Iran is really directly done by Russia, who is already giving weapons to Iran, which are almost the same make and model of the ones they're using in Ukraine. So you can see how they're willing to help out one country, but not another, even though the other country has been asking for help and is willing to do whatever it takes, agreeing to loans, agreeing to whatever the United States is saying to. Don't use our missiles long range. Fine, we'll use our own missiles. Okay, do X, Y, and Z. We can give you this. Fine. Like F-16s, for example. It was supposed to be in December, then March. Now it looks like July, even September. It's just, from outside point of view, it looks like that the U.S. is just completely stalled and will not help the one ally that they promised to help all the way back in the 90s. But once again, let me know what you think in the comments section below. I want your point of view. So do this for me, okay? I want you to write first the country that you currently live in, and then write your opinion. I'm very interested to see, where you're coming from and why your eyes are thinking, or your brain is thinking that way. Anyway, please go ahead and subscribe to us here on YouTube, as we are trying to build this channel. I know we need X amount of subscribers and X amount of hours watched in order to finally get monetized on this channel. So if you could please go ahead, like this video, and do comment. It does help with the algorithm. And once again, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Anyway, I'm Joey. Stay safe. See you later. Bye.